Hey guys, what's up? It's me, Thomas. Today we're back here with, well, how to beat. Today, well, I think we're in a rough time because we got how to beat the interdimensional entity in the Outwaters. Yeah, interdimensional entity. That's going to be nearly impossible to beat. I mean, unless we can play it right, we're screwed. So let's see where we should probably just pack up and run. If not, see how to beat it. Well, let's go. Be sure to like, subscribe for more. Hope you enjoy. Let's go.
If you were being mind-controlled by an unimaginable horror living deep below the Mojave Desert, what would you do? This unknown creature has a sinister plan for these four friends, and they're about to find themselves in the middle of a nightmare beyond their ability to understand. I'm going to break down the mistakes made, what you should do, and how to beat the interdimensional entity in the Outwaters.
Hours begin.
Listen up, How-To Beaters. Something is emerging from the
Raid.
shadows. I'm talking about Raid Shadow Legends with awesome visuals, loads of powerful champions, challenging PvE bosses, and tactical PvP content. We love the scary stuff here at How-To Pete, so I wanted to go through my top 3 scary Raid champions today. First up is Little Miss Annie, some nervous nightmare fuel, and despite the presence of her stitched mouth and eyes, she does have a very cute wig. Next up is Elegaeus. This dude has a serious tongue. Lastly, we have Gorlos Hellmaw. This dude's teeth have teeth. Survivors, seize this moment, for Raid Call of the Arbiter is also in full swing right now. This launch brings forth a wealth of enticing offerings, and a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. Each and every one of you will have the chance to claim Artak, one of the 5 new characters from the show, as a legendary champion for free. A gift that materializes merely by logging into Raid for 7 days, from this very moment until the eve of July 24th. With all of this exciting stuff and more coming to Raid, if you haven't started playing yet, then what are you waiting for? Use my link or scan the QR code right here and get a free starter pack with this cool in-game loot. Once you're in and crushing your enemies, come find me under my name, join my clan, and we'll be legends together. And I'll see you on the battlefield.
Robbie and his friends are about to find out that there are some places on Earth best left unexplored. The Outwaters begins with the perspective that we're reviewing unedited footage from 3 camera memory cards marked as evidence by the Mojave County Police Department and discovered in February of 2022. A slideshow plays of the 4 missing persons, Michelle, Angela, Scott, and Robbie, all last seen in August of 2017. Robbie records himself giving his older brother Scott birthday presents in his Los Angeles apartment. They share a laugh and celebrate with some whiskey. The tape cuts, and suddenly, Robbie's in the middle of a huge earthquake. His whole apartment shakes and items fall from the shelves, but the earthquake quickly subsides. Later, Robbie films a recording session of his friend Michelle singing her music, and they talk about their upcoming video shoot. Michelle tells Robbie that her mother used to sing this song to her as a lullaby when she was a kid, but she's recently passed away. Robbie flies to New Jersey to visit his mom and younger sister Angela. While there, he asks Angela to come out and style Michelle for the video. Several days later, back in LA, Scott, Angela, and Michelle gather at Robbie's apartment, and they set out on their trip. As they drive through the mountains listening to music, they suddenly hear an unexplained metallic sound from somewhere in the distance, but think nothing of it, besides sharing a brief moment of concern. The 4 of them stop for a tour through an old mine shaft somewhere in the mountains, and Michelle takes a picture of Robbie, flashing him with her camera. They drive through tunnels in the mountainside, but the audio is replaced with ritualistic chanting and rumbling sounds until it finally ends in a horrific screech. The next morning, Robbie wakes up and films the scenery at a beautiful shallow lake, saying that he doesn't want to leave. He and Michelle take a dip in the water, and then Robbie waits around a bit before grabbing his camera and going back to the group. Robbie records the sun reflecting off the surface of the water, while hypnotic reverberating sounds are heard faintly in the background. He repeats that he doesn't want to leave, and the recording switches over to memory card 2. Later that afternoon,
Yeah, I'll be real. Like, if I was looking at him, like, okay, sounds like this dude was into some weird stuff. I don't know, if I heard like metallic sounds and I didn't see anything in the sky, I'd be like, okay, what the heck was that? I mean, be a big clue, but I don't know if it'd be like, you know, it's time to leave deal, but you get the idea, right? It's definitely one thing I'm like, don't rethink yourself, sir. Well, anyway,
The group pulls onto a dirt path entering the Mojave Desert when they're blocked by a group of donkeys. Scott gets out and chases them away, jogging past a tire from some construction or military vehicle, an orange object on the ground, and a single post from a destroyed fence. The rumbling noise swells in the background again as they continue down the road. They park and hike into the desert, eventually making it to their campsite. Robbie mentions that they don't need to do any music video work until tomorrow, so they go out together to explore the area. Michelle finds a nearby spot where she says it looks like lightning recently struck, and she, Angela, and Scott stick together, while Robbie goes off on his own to check out the dry lake bed. Now, before we get too far here, we wanted to quickly check in with some of our friends over at the How to Beat video. If you want to look like the cool protagonist from your favorite horror movie, we suggest the official uniform of How to Beat video employees. These are the only shirts in the market specifically designed for signaling to the world you give great movie recommendations and are tailor-made for fending off the following: serial killers, axe murderers, werewolves, death games of all shapes and sizes, fast zombies, slow zombies, medium fast zombies, sexy vampires, ugly vampires, giant spiders, goblins, ghouls, ghosts, and gremlins. Aside from their unique defensive properties, they also just look really cool. So whether you're a video store employee or just someone who wants the world to know you're having a damn good day, head on over to the link in the description and order your apparel today. While exploring, Robbie finds a small animal skull that's split at the top perfectly in 4 ways, as if from some strange head trauma. He comments on the unusual strength of the wind, and far off in the distance, he notices a person walking around. They're too far away to see who they are, but they seem to be red from head to toe, as if covered in blood. Robbie records them for a moment, but never tries to get their attention. Okay, there's some seriously weird stuff going on here already. Let's take a moment to go over all the evidence we've seen so far and try to wrap our heads around what's happening to Robbie and his friends. According to the police records, Robbie and his friends have been missing for 4.5 years, and the 911 call that opens the file did not sound like it ended well. They all seem to have met a horrific end, and we're going to have to keep watching to find out what happened. Most of the first memory card is just Robbie recording some mundane interactions with his family and friend Michelle. They drink and make boring music, but the fun starts when the 4 of them head into the Mojave Desert to film their video. The first sign that something's wrong is the strange metallic humming that they encounter while driving up into the mountains. It could be a distortion of the audio file, but it seems like Robbie and Scott notice and react to the noise, even if they don't discuss it further. So what could the sound be? Searching for strange sounds heard in the desert, I came across a phenomenon known as the hum, a name given to widespread reports of a persistent, low-frequency rumbling, droning, or humming noise only audible to a small percentage of the population in the affected area. Hums have been reported around the world, including one particularly noteworthy case in the city of Taos, New Mexico, dubbed the Taos Hum, that bears a close resemblance to the sounds that Robbie and Scott just heard. First reported in the 1990s, the Taos Hum still affects between 2 and 5% of the city's population to this day. Hearers report a persistent bassy rumbling or whirring sound that seems to have no easily identifiable source. They're left with 2 options: either learn to live with the sound or move away. And some hearers have even understandably fallen into states of anxiety and paranoia. Although many physical and psychological explanations have been offered, from the simple idling of nearby construction equipment to the vehicles of visitors from outer space to mass delusions and auditory hallucinations, the Taos Hum phenomenon remains an unsolved mystery. Since the hum can only be...
I mean, to be fair, it is a small percents, I don't know, say it that way. But yeah, I'll be real. If I was one of them and heard that noise like constantly, I'd be like, Jesus Christ, what is causing all that? Like, I'd be worried about my own sanity at that point. Like, if they can't hear it, yet I can. That is odd. Like, you know that ring in your ears you get sometimes? I feel like it's one of those, just on a more constant level. Right? I don't know. Again, I'm not sure if I ever hear those kinds of sounds, but... Anyway.
Heard by a small percentage of the population, perhaps that's why Robbie and Scott are the only ones who seem to react to it. Maybe as brothers, they share some genetic predisposition to being able to hear sounds that most others cannot. It's possible that the area they're traveling to is home to a similar hum-like phenomenon, and we'll have to wait and see if it comes up again. After they take a tour through the mine shaft, Robbie and his equipment start behaving a bit strangely. It's important to remember that the video file we are watching is raw, unaltered footage, meaning that everything we see and hear is what was recorded directly onto the camera and nothing was edited in later. As the sun sets and they drive through the mountains, the audio is taken over by strange chanting and rumbling sounds, and Robbie feels inclined to film the sky upside down and through the car's side view mirror. The audio file becoming corrupted could be explained by Robbie unknowingly encountering some sort of power powerful electromagnetic field coming from somewhere deep underground. But corrupted audio usually just results in pops and static, not loud menacing chanting, and that still doesn't explain why Robbie goes from talkative social butterfly to zoned out and silently filming the sky. To me, it seems like some entity possessed the camera and may even have started to take a hold of Robbie, perhaps while they were underground at the mine. It could be related to electromagnetic fields, the hum phenomenon that we heard earlier, or possibly the flash from Michelle's camera, but some unknown force is definitely lingering in the background, and it seems sinister to me. In the morning, Robbie seems a bit spaced out and goes off to swim in the lake by himself, repeating to the camera that he doesn't want to leave in a monotone voice. He quietly filmed the sky reflected in the rippling surface of the water, and in the background, we once again hear the reverberating metallic sounds. He almost seems hypnotized, and there's definitely a change in his personality from the day before. When Robbie films Scott chasing away the group of donkeys, we catch a brief glimpse of a discarded tire from an off-road vehicle, a ruined fence post, and an orange object on the ground that looks like it could be a warning or no trespassing sign. It could just be random garbage, but given the location where the junk is found, it also could mean that they're about to stumble onto an abandoned military testing site or dumping ground. Nearby areas of the Nevada desert have historically been used for nuclear weapons testing since the early 1950s, the side effects of which had an impact on the environment and local civilian population that persists to this day. One specific area known as the Nevada Test Site hosted over 900 nuclear weapon tests since it was first established in 1951. Nuclear fallout from above-ground testing at the site quickly caused a horrifying increase in cancers affecting populations in the surrounding area, and so testing was eventually moved underground. If Robbie and his friends were to accidentally set up camp in the middle of such a site, who knows what kind of side effects they might experience. Out on the dry lake bed, Robbie finds a small animal skull that's been mysteriously fractured by some unknown head trauma. That would be concerning enough on its own, but it's quickly overshadowed by the appearance of a bloody-looking stranger off in the distance. Robbie's friends were traveling together and headed in the opposite direction, so it logically can't be anyone from his group. This area of the desert is so isolated that there's pretty much no reason for any sane person to be out there wandering around alone, and it looks to me like they might be about to run into a the hills have eyes type situation. As soon as I saw that, I would have gone straight back to my friends and told them that the music video was canceled. We're packing our things and going home immediately. Robbie's lack of any reaction to the mysterious figure makes me think that he's definitely under the control of some unseen entity, and the strange noises, camera glitches, and wandering person are all related somehow. My best guess, given the evidence we have so far, is that they've accidentally stumbled into the hunting grounds of some unknown being which has made its home deep underground in an abandoned government testing site. Not the best place to be shooting a music video, all things considered. We don't know enough about what's going on yet to come up with a plan to fight back, but we've definitely seen enough to know that it's time to get the hell out of there before the sun goes down. Unfortunately for
Yeah, but if we know the story, and considering we got the footage and they're still missing, you know they never heeded the warnings. And honestly, if I was there, or at least saw Robbie acting like this, and saw all this crazy shit, I would have just found some time to wait for, him to go, and be like, guys, we gotta get the fuck out of here. This ain't right. Let's just find a different spot, okay? This doesn't feel right. I'm just saying, if you ever have these kind of moments, just trust your gut, get out. I just start running. Especially with an isolated part of the desert. Not good. Kind of to a point, it could be a hills that have eyes kind of deal. Which, like I said, not the best place to shoot a music video. It's kind of asking for trouble. Anyway.
Robbie and his friends, the real nightmare is just about to get started. Robbie records Angela and Michelle while they get ready to shoot her music video. Suddenly, the wind picks up and begins to blow violently, distorting the audio. Wandering around alone at some point later, Robbie finds a large axe stuck into the rocks on top of a dirt hill. He goes to check it out, and a strong wind starts blowing again, but he simply comments that the axe is awesome and moves on. The sun begins to set, and Robbie and Scott walk around recording the sounds of nature. Off in the distance, coyotes start howling like crazy, and Robbie hears a deep, reverberating explosion-like sound. They head to bed, but hear several of the explosions coming from somewhere in the distance. Scott and Robbie decide to see what's causing the sounds, and the girls get up to join them. Michelle says that the hair all over her body is standing up, and Robbie mentions that he feels a strange rippling. Suddenly, a massive explosion echoes through the canyon, startling Angela. Robbie tells her that it's just thunder, but Angela insists that it isn't normal, and they head back to their tents. Robbie stays out alone to get more footage when he comes upon a bright strobing light and hears echoing sounds like somebody screaming from far away down a tunnel. He shines his flashlight at the source of the strobe, but at the last moment, the recording cuts away. Okay, we've officially got mysterious glowing orbs on the scene, and those are never good. Michelle understandably has some unresolved emotions surrounding the recent death of her mother. She cries whenever her mother's memory is brought up, and even wears her dress during the video shoot as a way to pay her respects. If whatever's stalking them plans to prey on weakened aspects of their psyche, this makes Michelle a likely candidate for an attack, and I'd want to keep an eye on her in case she starts behaving strangely. When Robbie finds the axe stuck in the hillside, he thinks that it's awesome, but I would have been starting to get extremely concerned. What is an axe doing out there so far from any other signs of civilization, and who put it there? It could just be left behind from some long-abandoned project, but why would they take all their other tools and only forget the axe? It seems pretty obvious to me that the axe belongs to someone or something that is still nearby, and I think that whatever they plan to do with it will certainly not be good for our clueless group of city folk. It's time to get out of there while they still have the chance. That night, the local wildlife begins to go crazy as what sounds like explosions go off in the distance. The noises sound an awful lot like bombs going off, although the area where they're staying shouldn't have had active above-ground military testing taking place in several decades. The most obvious answer is that it's just a thunderstorm. We're left with the chilling possibility that the residual sounds of the nuclear testing from decades before are somehow reappearing in the dead of night through some sort of hole in time. While they walk around investigating the sounds, Robbie says that he feels a rippling sensation, and Michelle says that the hair all over her body is standing up. It seems that they're caught in the middle of some sort of electrical storm, even though no lightning can be seen at first. Alone in the darkness, Robbie encounters the first strobing light phenomenon. The camera cuts away before we can get a glimpse at the sources of the light, but I have a few different ideas for what it could be. Glowing balls of light have been reported around the world in areas with a high concentration of unexplained phenomena, and those cases without a logical explanation are often chalked up to extraterrestrial or supernatural sources. Some alien or supernatural creature could be the source of these mysterious occurrences, and now it's just caught Robbie out there all alone. Another possible explanation comes from the fact that earlier in the film, we saw that Robbie owns a strobe light himself, and most likely brought it with him for the music video shoot. The flashing light could simply be the one that Robbie brought along, and someone or something got a hold of it and used it to lure Robbie into a trap. Whatever the explanation turns out to be, Robbie and his friend should have gotten out of there a long time ago, and things are only going to get more horrific from here. The next morning, Robbie films steam coming off of the dry riverbed as a strong wind continues to blow. He comments that the air feels shimmery, and that he definitely felt a deep earthquake the night before. Robbie goes back to the tents and talks with Angela, who says that she wants to leave, and mentions that Michelle woke up crying after having dreams about her dead mom. Robbie takes Michelle for a hike, and they talk about what happened the night before. He tells her that after everyone went to sleep, he saw a ball of light in the trail which folded in on itself and made a tear in the space in front of him before disappearing into the ground. Robbie takes a microphone and sticks it into a strange cylindrical hole in the rocks, and suddenly, the audio is overtaken by an intense reverberating sound like radio feedback in which faint traces of voices and music can be heard. Michelle walks up and presses her ear right against the hole, saying that it's like she can hear the ocean. They walk around touching the rocks, and Robbie comments that it feels like there are currents running underneath it. Michelle agrees, saying that she feels it too, and Robbie mentions that his camera battery hasn't lost any power since they got there. Michelle tells Robbie that she had a dream the night before, where her mother came to her in a dark storm, and several hands reached out to grab her, making her feel like she was suffocating. Robbie says that he had weird dreams too, but they both say that they're still happy to be there. Robbie and Michelle go out to the lake bed to record some footage for the video, but the wind is incredibly strong, and Robbie forgot his audio equipment. He places the camera on the lake bed to get some shots of Michelle, but the audio is taken over by a deep resonating sound similar to those heard when underwater. Day passes into night, and the audio further deforms into a sonar-like pinging and the disturbing sound of a baby crying before the recording ends and memory card 3 begins. That night, the explosions return far off in the distance. They all head to bed, but Scott and Robbie lay awake listening to the sounds. Scott can't help but be curious and opens the tent to peek outside, but sees nothing, although the explosions continue. Scott comes back to the tent, but Robbie says that now he wants to go out. Robbie walks a few yards away and turns around to look at the tents, but turns off his flashlight when he hears a crunching sound behind him. Turning around, he sees the silhouette of a hatchet-wielding man standing on the hillside. Robbie yells out, "Who is that?" but gets no response. He begins to walk away slowly, but suddenly, we hear the sounds of someone running up to him, followed by a sickening thud and dripping blood. The strobe light returns along with the crashing of explosions, but this time, it flies right towards the camera with a horrifying screech. Robbie goes back to the campsite and shines his flashlight into the girl's tent. A panicked Angela asks him what's going on, but Robbie only replies, "My head is raining," in a disoriented voice. He goes back to the tent where Scott is sleeping, repeatedly saying that the sky opened up, before dragging a bloody finger across his back and waking him. Suddenly, the recording cuts to everyone running for their lives and screaming, and in the darkness, Robbie hears the sounds of his friends being violently killed. Michelle screams out for her mother over and over again, and Robbie cowers in fear until eventually the screaming stops. Robbie shines his flashlight on the ground, following a thick trail of blood until he comes upon a man crouched in the bushes, brutally cutting one of his friends up with the axe. He runs and finds Angela completely covered in blood and crying uncontrollably. She asks him if the man is coming and pleads with Robbie not to leave her, but there's a horrific screech and the video cuts out. Okay, remember what I said before about this turning into a the hills have eyes type situation? Well, Robbie, I hate to say I told you so, but the truth is that things might actually be much, much worse. Looking around the riverbed the next morning, Robbie mentions that the air seems to be shimmering and that he felt a deep earthquake the night before. The shimmering air could just be sunlight reflecting off of evaporating water, but since they're in the middle of a dry riverbed, the water must be coming from beneath the ground. Earthquakes are a common occurrence in the Mojave Desert, as it lies near the boundary between the North American and Pacific tectonic plates. Taken at face value, these are pretty standard natural occurrences, but given the extreme weirdness that's been going on, it's definitely possible that they might be related to something of the supernatural variety. Angela mentions that Michelle was up all night having dreams about her dead mom, which brings us back to the point I made before about her being a prime candidate for a psychological attack by an evil entity. Robbie later reveals that he had a nightmare too, and although it's still not concrete proof that something is trying to get in their heads, it sure is starting to look that way. I'd say it's time to go, but then again, it's been time to go, and these guys aren't picking up on any of the warning signs, so I don't have high hopes for their chances of survival once who or whatever it is that's stalking them decides to really get things going. Robbie tells Michelle that the night before, he saw a floating ball of light fold space and disappear into the mountainside right before his eyes. In the world of paranormal investigation, floating orbs are thought to be a manifestation of spiritual energy in the physical world. Pretty standard stuff if you live on Skadewalker Ranch, sure, but anyone with common sense should be having this conversation in the car as they're driving home after calling the trip a quits. I'm all for friendly ghosts, but honestly, I don't want to see any sort of spirit manifesting under any circumstance, let alone at night in the middle of the Mojave Desert. Things somehow get even worse when Robbie uses his audio equipment to record the sounds coming from underground. The intense noises that he picks up sound a lot like electronic feedback, meaning that there's likely something underground that's emitting some sort of electrical field. There could be a secret government experiment going on down there, or some kind of supernatural entity that's made the underground its home. We still don't have enough evidence to tell, but what we do know for sure is that whatever it is, you don't want to be camping and shooting your little music video directly above it. Michelle puts her ear to the hole and says that it sounds like she can hear the ocean, but we'll only find out later just how close to the truth she was. The current beneath the rock.
Yeah, like I said, I would have left a long time ago. Like, as soon as I saw that axe, I think. There's a lot here that was like, yep, time to go. And just run for the hills. But these guys, they stay for the music video. Like, dude, I'm pretty sure there's another day you could use. You know, Mojave's a big place, so you could just figure it out from there. You know? Anyway.
Rocks felt by Robbie and Michelle is actually rooted in natural phenomena called telluric currents. Telluric currents, also called earth currents, are extremely low-frequency electrical currents caused by changes in magnetic fields that travel over large areas at or near the Earth's surface. Something nearby, most likely either government testing or a supernatural extraterrestrial or interdimensional being, must be boosting the current in some way, which would help explain what Michelle and Robbie are feeling, why his camera doesn't need to be charged, and some of the mysterious electrical phenomena occurring at night. As soon as Robbie puts the camera down on the lake bed, the audio is taken over by noises that sound like they're coming from someplace deep underwater. The sonar-like pinging and sounds of a baby crying make me think of an ultrasound. Perhaps whatever entity is possessing the camera is trying to communicate a message about birth. That night, the explosive sounds return, and Robbie decides to go off investigating on his own. A bad idea after having such a close call with spirit orbs the night before, I know, but at least this time he has a hatchet-wielding maniac to keep him company, who I might add looks a lot like Robbie. Let's be real. Once we saw the axe in the hillside, anyone with common sense knew that this guy was going to show up sooner or later, so the only person Robbie has to blame for what's about to happen next is himself. Robbie bellows out an intimidating "who's that?" with all the ferocity of a hermit crab, and I'm quite surprised that the wardrobe challenge maniac didn't run off right away. But that thud we heard didn't sound too good for our intrepid videographer. He isn't killed though, and after another chat with the strobe light, he stumbles back to camp just in time to mumble some gibberish at his friends before the Axeman turns them all into ground beef. I think it's safe to say that things are no longer going as planned, and here's my theory about what's going on so far. Some sort of powerful being that's supernatural, extraterrestrial, or interdimensional in nature has made its home deep below the surface of the dry lake bed, perhaps attracted to the area by the high levels of radiation created by by military testing or accidentally brought to our world as an unintended consequence of some scientific experiment. The creature uses electrical currents and low-frequency sound waves to initiate a sort of mind control over its victims, in this case Robbie and his friends, and get them to do its bidding. As for the creature's goal, for now your guess is as good as mine, but we can say for sure that it has something to do with Robbie's friends becoming red jelly. Michelle, Angela, and Scott all seem to have been brutally murdered by the hatchet-wielding minion, and now all that's left is to see what else Robbie experiences as he falls deeper down the wormhole of insanity. The next morning, Robbie emerges from a cave in the cliffside disoriented and covered in blood, and walks out silently into the desert. Down in the valley, Robbie nervously approaches something off camera, laughing and saying that he's coming. He hesitantly reaches out towards the thing off screen, and suddenly a bunch of bloody worm-like creatures slither towards him, emanating an ear-piercing shriek. Robbie runs away as the thunderous explosions boom in the background, even though it's daytime and the sky is clear. He comes to the spot where he first saw the ball of light disappear into the rocks, and finds a pile of bloody viscera on the ground. One of the worms returns and seems to feed on the flesh before slithering away. Further down the riverbed, he finds a single bloody flashlight, saying that he's sorry before reaching towards the sky as the explosions sound in the distance. As the sun sets, Robbie returns to the tent and finds Michelle's bloody body inside. He wanders off into the desert and calls his mom with his cell phone, saying goodbye mom before putting the camera down. He walks away for a moment before coming back saying I found it, and holding out his bloody hand as one of the worm-like creatures slithers towards him with a blood-curdling screech. Night falls and Robbie stumbles around the desert with his small flashlight, repeatedly needing to remind himself of who he is. He hears branches snap just out of sight and yells out for someone to please help him, but quickly forgets who he is again and goes back to his confused wandering. In the darkness, he sees the same silhouetted man holding the hatchet from before. He shines his flashlight around him and sees a pair of bloody legs and the blood-covered axe accompanied by a demonic insectoid clicking sound. Robbie repeatedly tells the man to go away, and the stranger leaves for a moment, before slowly creeping back towards him, but leaves him unharmed. Robbie continues walking around in the dark until he sees the strobing orb of light off in the distance. He stares into it and calls out with a nervous hello, hearing his own voice as if it's coming from inside a tunnel. Suddenly, the camera cuts to a flashing image from the bottom of a small cylindrical stone tunnel, very similar in appearance to the ones that Robbie stuck his microphone down earlier in the trip. The camera is submerged in a pit of blood-red water, and an echoing sound like a heartbeat can be heard. The strobing light returns, and suddenly Robbie regains consciousness back out in the valley in the middle of the day. He throws up a massive amount of blood, as if he had just been practically drowning in it. Robbie sits down on the rocks and begins peeling a strange layer of bloody flesh off of his feet. He lays the flesh on the ground, asking can you see that, as one of the worm-like creatures lunges towards him with its signature screeching sound. Robbie runs in a panicked state, holding the camera upside down and clearly in a large amount of pain. Okay, who invited the Grab Boy babies from hell to the music video shoot? It looks like Robbie managed to survive the night by hiding in that cave. As for the rest of the group, we're about to see that things didn't go so well. I'll admit it, right now I have no idea what these worm creatures are, although it almost looks like they were somehow created from the organs of Robbie's recently butchered friends. I can tell you this much though, I wouldn't be sticking around to find out, and I'd be looking for the axe to defend myself with in case one of them tried to take a chomp out of my leg. Robbie seems like he's trying to make friends with them, meaning the worms or whatever created them must have him under some sort of mind control, which could have to do with the now constant explosion sounds going off in the background. Based on what he finds down the trail and back at the campsite, it looks like Robbie's friends are all worm food. At this point, a logical person would be trying to get out of there by any means possible, but Robbie's only spiraling deeper into insanity. He's also experiencing bouts of amnesia, having trouble remembering who he is, probably as a result of the head injury he seems to have sustained during the scuffle with the Axeman. Before he's completely lost it, he manages to make a phone call to his mom to say goodbye, and she sounds extremely worried, saying that she hasn't heard from him or Scott in days. If that's the case, I'm curious why it took so long for police to find the camera and memory cards. Remember, Robbie and his friends went missing in 2017, but the Mojave County PD didn't discover the tapes until 2022, several years later. I'm sure that Robbie's mom would have called the police to report them missing after this disturbing phone call, and since Robbie had good enough phone service to get a call through, the police should have been able to use the call detail records to give them an idea of where Robbie was. They're also only about a day's drive and hike from civilization, so if there were any efforts made to find them, the rescue teams would have certainly come across their remains. The only explanation is that someone or something must have tried to hide the evidence or dispose of it for its own nefarious reasons. The axe-wielding maniac is back, and he's
bodies.
behaving strangely, which I know seems like an obvious statement, but let me explain. You would expect him to charge at Robbie, maybe take a couple chops, you know, standard axe murderer type stuff. But this guy kind of just staggers around making a weird bug-like clicking noise, which is actually somehow worse. Sun Tzu said you can't beat an enemy that you don't understand, but I say hell with that. Sweep the leg, get that axe, kill this bug boy, and ask questions later. Robbie's just not that guy, it seems. Robbie should have fought back when he had a chance, but the strobe light comes back and we finally see where it's been taking him. The next thing we know, the camera's at the bottom of what looks like one of those worm tunnels in the rocks, and beneath the surface is a raging lake of water and blood. The strobe light comes back and returns Robbie to the surface, where he throws up a stomach full of blood and peels a weird layer of fleshy substance off of his feet. It looks like since I caught him on the first night, the ball of energy has been transporting Robbie through the ground and into this subterranean pool of blood water. Submerged in the liquid, he must have been in some way cloned or reborn by the creature that lives there and sent back above ground to do its evil bidding. This would explain the axe-wielding doppelganger, bouts of amnesia, and psychotic behavior, and the strange layer of flesh that stuck to his body after he's cast back to the surface. As for how we're going to beat whatever it is that's doing this, I hate to say it, but it looks like it's already too late. Although I do have one idea. The Mojave Desert is home to a highly poisonous species of flowering plant called datura, also known as devil's trumpets. When ingested, datura flowers are known to cause severe respiratory depression, fever, hallucinations, and even death. Since the worm creatures seem to be feeding on Robbie's friends' body, I would have laced their bloody remains with datura flowers in the hopes that the worms would consume them, and possibly even bring some of the contaminated flesh back to whoever or whatever is controlling them, killing them all. Of course, successfully acting on this plan would require Robbie to be thinking logically, but he seems to be completely under the unknown creature's mind control, making any sort of planning near impossible. Just make sure that if you're ever shooting a music video out in the Mojave Desert, you leave at the first sign of any spirit orbs floating around your campsite. And for now, let's keep watching to see how this all ends. Robbie wanders until he comes to a Joshua tree, and in the distance, he sees himself and the three others walking through the desert as if they were on their way to their first night of camping. He screams out for Scott and the others, but only hears his own voice echo. Far off across the lake bed, Robbie sees what looks like steam rising from the ground and goes to investigate. When he gets there, he sees long lines of cylinder-shaped holes all over the ground that look like they could have been made by an earthquake, the explosions, or even the worm-like creatures. Suddenly, he sees Michelle covered in blood laying in the middle of the lake bed and runs towards her, but she gets up and runs away. He chases after her, crying in pain and fear, begging her to come back. She lays down again, and Robbie places the camera on the ground upside down near her, but she gets up and runs around frantically for a second time. After touching the ground, the audio in the camera is once again completely distorted, with reverberating submarine sounds. The recording suddenly cuts to an upside-down image of a three-pointed object sticking out from the lake bed, accompanied by an extremely disturbing sound. That night, Robbie wanders around the lake bed with his flashlight in the dark, while his friends scream in the background. Robbie looks at the ground and asks, "Do you see it?" And insectoid chittering sounds can be heard coming from somewhere in the darkness. The strobe light shows up again, and Robbie walks towards it, and it flies at him with a high-pitched screech. Robbie follows a trail of blood back to the tents and hears Michelle singing her lullaby. He nervously approaches his blood-covered tent and climbs in. Thunder strikes, and Scott sits up covered in blood, illuminated by Robbie's flashlight. Scott calmly asks Robbie if he hears the noises, and slowly unzips the tent and walks out. Suddenly, Robbie's in the tent with a blood-covered Angela, who looks at him and says that she doesn't want to be here anymore. Robbie begins whispering the Anima Christi, a Catholic prayer to Jesus, and outside the tent, they hear what sounds like an old woman crying. Robbie crawls out of the tent and realizes that he's in his mother's house, but the place is pitch dark. Robbie creeps around the house reciting his prayer until he finally finds his mom, crying deeply and also covered in blood. She looks at him in shock and says she's so glad he's home before turning and leaving the room. Robbie cries out to her that he can't find Scott, but she's gone, and he goes back to reciting his prayer as the strobing light appears again. Suddenly, Robbie sees Scott's face through a blood-covered plane window. He tells Scott that he's sorry and he loves him, but the plane falls away into the darkness. The strobe light returns, this time illuminating Michelle's creepy silhouette. She asks, "Where's my baby?" and whispers, "We're alive again," before the strobe light blinds Robbie again. Robbie walks towards the light, this time able to reach it, and finds out that it's just a flashlight, picking it up and turning it off. He shines his flashlight on a pool of deep red blood running down to the cracks in the lake bed and crouches to the ground whispering, "Do you see it?" Robbie runs until he hears the sound of massive footsteps and comes to some enormous subterranean demon or alien creature that gurgles at him from the darkness, making dinosaur sounds. He stays with it for a while before running away into the dark. Robbie runs back to the blood-covered tent and gets in with Angela, telling her to be quiet, but the screaming worm creatures make their way into the tent and wrap around his body. The camera cuts, and suddenly Robbie's being carried up the hill by some unseen unseen force. It brings them to the axe, and a demonic voice says, "Show them." The camera cuts again, and now Robbie is back in the swirling subterranean blood waters. The strobe light returns, and Robbie falls into a dimension of floating lights in utter darkness. The camera spins and whirls around unpredictably, and the audio file's taken over by a chorus of angelic singing, accompanied by strange noises. Somehow back at the riverbed, Robbie finds himself standing on top of a restricted area sign half covered in dirt. Nearby, he finds an old gas mask indicating that some sort of military exercise may have gone on here. He walks a bit further and suddenly sees himself crouched in the bushes, covered in blood and holding the axe. He walks up and says hi, but the bloody doppelganger lunges at him and Robbie takes off running. The sun begins to rise and Robbie runs until he comes upon the three-posted object from his vision. He shines his light up the blood-covered post, revealing the decomposing heads of his three friends stuck to the top of each one. Robbie stays with the heads until the sun is fully in the sky, singing Michelle's lullaby to himself. After a while, he goes up to Michelle's decomposed head and whispers goodbye before walking away. Okay, wow, that was a lot to take in. The fact that Robbie sees he and his friends from the past could just be a hallucination, but I think it proves beyond a doubt that the unknown entity has Robbie trapped in a time loop. He has encounters with each one of them again as if they're alive. Michelle running from him on the lakebed, and Scott and Angela waiting for him back at the tents. But they're all covered in blood and behaving as if they're possessed. The next morning, we get to see what really happened to them, but what could have motivated this insane rampage. Now that we've come to the end of the tapes, it's time to come up with a final theory on what happened and if there was anything Robbie and his friends could have done to survive. So here's what I think. In my opinion, we are dealing with an interdimensional creature living in the subterranean waters beneath the dry lake. How it got there, I'm not completely sure, but we can narrow it down to two options. Either it being attracted to the site due to leftover radiation from government testing, or accidentally brought to the site by way of an experiment gone wrong. The restricted area sign and gas mask that Robbie finds at the end further indicates the possibility of military involvement. The entity is able to manipulate time and electromagnetic fields in ways that we can't understand, and the constant booming sounds must be the sounds of Cold War era nuclear testing that were somehow echoing across time due to whatever the entity is doing. Robbie must have been possessed by the entity at some point during the trip, probably starting during his tour of the mineshaft and locked in during his first encounter with the orbs of energy. The entity then set a copy of Robbie loose on them with the axe the next night, brutally killing all of his friends, but for some reason leaving Robbie alive, perhaps needing to keep him alive until whatever ritual it's conducting is complete. Evil Robbie then decapitated each of his friends and stuck them on those sacrificial posts, their blood draining down into the lakebed and calling the worm creatures up to feed. When it was ready, the massive Lovecraftian creature behind the scenes finally revealed itself to Robbie, and he ran away in terror, as you do. Now, faced with the scene of his friends on sacrificial display, the only thing left for Robbie to do is complete the ritual and join them in the waters below. Robbie and his friends should have packed up and left at the first sign of orbs floating around in the desert, or better yet, never have gone out there in the first place. Next time you're thinking about going out into the Mojave Desert to shoot a music video, consider just using a green screen instead. These tapes were quite a challenge to decipher, and if you have a different theory or notice any details that I missed, let me know in the comments. Now let's see how our cameraman met his grisly end. A short distance from the heads, Robbie finds a shark tooth lying in the riverbed and starts to cut off pieces of his own skin with it. He works his way up his leg and well, look, I don't know if I can say what he does next on YouTube, but if you've seen the movie, I know you know what I'm talking about. Finally, Robbie slices his stomach open with a tooth and stumbles forward across the lakebed. He puts the camera down and reaches up to the sky as the camera cuts to black, and the insanity is finally over.
But what do you...
Jesus, that was a nightmare. For us, and, well, for them. You know what I mean, right? Jesus. Anyway, well, looks like no one survives, and honestly, like I said, yeah, I agree. Leaving the first sign trouble definitely would have saved them a lot of headaches. Anyway, until next time, guys, thanks for watching. Let me know how you could survive. See ya.